Look, there's no way that Putin is going to be able to cope. He's already lost Ukraine. The idea that he's ever going to be able to well, here's what he thought. He thought that if he invaded Ukraine, first of all, he'd get a welcome by every Russian speaker. They'd say, come on in. Secondly, he thought what would happen is that NATO would collapse. NATO would not do anything. Right. They'd be afraid to act. Then he thought, anyway, go down the line. None of that's happening.
Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops at 300,000, well equipped, as well equipped as any army in the world, and an Air Force, against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
This is my first video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Friday morning. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. And there's a lot of talk about this Russian offensive, this big Russian offensive in the northeast, to be more precise, the Sunni region. And the Russians, according to various reports, have amassed a very large military force in this area. And they're about to go on this big offensive. Probably true. Probably, but I would say let's wait a couple of days just to make sure, or maybe a couple of weeks, just to make sure that this is accurate and that the Russians are indeed going to be on the move in the northeast of Ukraine with this massive force that allegedly they've amassed in that area. Until then, I think it's still important to keep an eye on Bakhmut and what is going on in Bakhmut, because that's, to me, still the center focus of fighting. And from what I understand, in Bakhmut, things are looking very, very bad for the Ukraine military. 5,000 to 7,000 Ukraine soldiers are allegedly either encircled or about to be encircled in Bakhmut. And from what I understand, the Russians are feeling very confident in their progress to the point where they're actually increasing the size of the overall encirclement, like the size of the cauldron. They're actually increasing it because they're making good progress, according to the Russian sources. So it's not a good situation for the Ukraine military in Bakhmut, but there's a lot of analysis which is saying that the Russians don't want to completely encircle the area because it's serving their demilitarization needs. The fact that Zelensky continues to pour resources into Bakhmut. There are many analysts who claim that this is exactly what the Russians want. They can just sit back and just have more and more Ukraine forces enter this region. I guess there's merit to that argument as well. But if you work off of the assumption that the Russians will encircle Bakhmut and take that city, then it would lead to the collapse of Slaviansk, Kramatorsk. It would basically just lead to the entire collapse of the front line in Donbass. And that would be a massive military loss and setback for the Zelensky regime. To get detailed information on what is going on the ground, I'll put a link to Defense Politics Asia. They put out a really good video yesterday, about 10 minutes long, which explains the situation in Bakhmut. And it explains it in such a way that it's not only very detailed, but it's very easy to follow along and understand. So I'll put a link for that down below, and I think that'll give everybody a clear picture as to the situation in Bakhmut. And I'll also put a link to a video that was posted on Levan's channel. And he is He is not only giving a picture, a military picture as to what is happening in the Bakhmut area, but in his video yesterday, he broadens it out to cover the various other areas of combat. So I'll put those links down below, and you can check it out and get a much clearer understanding as to the military situation in Ukraine. But I wanted to talk about the military situation in Ukraine because it leads into my next story, and that has to do with Zelensky touring Europe. And I just find it odd that the leader of Ukraine is traveling to London, he's traveling to Paris, now he's in Brussels, and he's traveling all around Europe while his military collapses. And I don't think that's normal behavior. You could make the argument that Zelensky has to go and travel to Europe because he's going to be the guy that's going to convince the Europeans to give over their weapons and to raise money as well. So you can make that argument, but does Zelensky really need to travel to Paris to convince Macron or Schultz or Mark Rutte or any one of these guys to give over their weapons or to give him a couple of $1 billion? He didn't have to do it in the past. Why does he have to do it now? I don't know. I mean, maybe the Europeans are starting to get a sense as to what is going on the ground, and they're starting to get cold feet and saying, well, I don't really want to give Zelensky more money and more weapons because they're losing. So maybe he has to go there on orders. Maybe he's got an orders from Blinken or Newland to go there and create the whole PR narrative so that he puts the Europeans in a difficult situation. You know, you got to remember that there's not one EU leader that wants to be the guy or the girl that didn't provide Zelensky with the fighter jets when his regime crumbles. They don't want to be the person blamed. So they're all kind of saying, well, I've given tanks, I've given fighter jets, I've given money. Don't blame me. Don't blame me for everything that's happened. And so you have EU leaders on the one hand trying to say, you know what, I don't want to throw money into a project that is, for all intents and purposes, has collapsed. Doesn't make any sense. Good money after bad, you know, that type of thinking. But on the flip side, they have to contend with the fact that if we don't give money to Ukraine, then we may be the country that's demonized as being at fault for the loss. So they're trying to figure that out. But as I was doing my video yesterday, I was looking at some of the photos and the videos from Zelensky's meeting with Sunak. And I just thought it was really bizarre how Sunak and Zelensky were cracking jokes. There was one video where Zelensky was at a press conference with Sunak next to him, and he says something like, I didn't know it takes 3 years to train a pilot. I'll send you my pilot and you can train him in 2.5 years, something like that. And everyone laughed, including Sunak.
I didn't even know that it takes 3 years to train a pilot like that. You know, come on, we will be sending you pilots who've already trained for 2.5 years, you know.
I just thought that was really odd. You know, your country's disintegrating and you're kind of joking around with Rishi about training pilots. I don't know, I just found it as very, very bizarre. And then there's the photo of him and Sunak with like these big helmets. Like the helmets are bigger than their bodies, right? And they're walking to, I guess, one of the fighter jets. And you can tell that it's obviously a staged photo. It's obviously a photo that's been prepared, but it just looks so weird. It doesn't look like someone who's concerned about the fate of his country and his people and his military. It just looks like a leader who's in Europe, kind of palling around with the European elites, looking to collect cash and weapons. And he's doing some press conference and photo ops and handing helmets to parliament speakers. And then he met with Macron. Did you see when Zelensky met Macron and they were like hugging three times and they were holding each other's hands like, I don't know, like a couple that's if he got these deep feelings for each other. I'll leave it there. I mean, it was really weird. The optics of it all. Very, I don't know, just something doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't seem like this is the body language, the actions, the laughing, the giggling. It doesn't seem like this is something that you'd expect from a president who's at war and whose country is disintegrating. Just my take. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's part of Zelensky's charm. Maybe he's able to compartmentalize because of his acting skills, and he knows when to turn on the laughter, and he knows when to turn on the sorrow or the anger. I don't know. I'm just telling you all what I got from a lot of the photos and videos that I saw from him in UK and from him in Paris, as well as in Brussels. How about the optics in Brussels, where Michel was like escorting Zelensky, who changed his sweatshirt, by the way. He ditched the camo green, and now he's wearing, or the olive green, and now he's wearing a black sweatshirt. But he came in for the photo op of all the EU leaders, and they were all clapping, except for one man. And that man was Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban does not like Zelensky. He was not clapping. He was not happy that Zelensky was there. He knows the score. He knows what's going on, and he doesn't want any part of it. You could tell. Everyone else was clapping, and Orban, who was like right behind Zelensky, was like, "This is a train wreck." He knows what's going to happen to Europe. He knows what's going to happen to Ukraine, and Orban reminds me of the leader, of the person that kept on trying to warn them. Let's get a ceasefire. Let's find some peace. Let's not put these sanctions on Russia. This is going to tear Europe apart. This is going to tear Ukraine apart. He was the guy that kept on warning, and everyone just told him to shut up. And now he's kind of like, I'm telling you guys, things are bad. Why did you bring this guy here? Why did you bring him to Europe? What's the reason? That was Orban. What are you guys doing? Wake up, everybody. That was Orban. Anyway, you had those optics as well in Europe, and Zelensky gave a speech to the parliament, and he talked about getting more weapons and money, and Ursula pledged to Zelensky that the 10th sanctions package is going to be what Zelensky has asked for, which she's saying it's going to be banning on exports and other stuff like that from Russia. I don't even know what they can sanction at this point, because nuclear energy and diamonds and stuff like that is off the table. But Zelensky continues to make the case that Europe should go after Russia's nuclear energy industry, for example. But Hungary, Belgium, they've said, no, this is a no-go for us. But then Ursula said that she got a list from Zelensky of Putin propagandists, and she's going to sanction them as well, which is completely bonkers, because you have the leader of a non-EU country giving her a list of Putin propagandists that she's going to then sanction. It shows that she's completely lost her mind. This has become very, very emotional for her. It's emotional for Biden. It's become emotional. Obviously, it's emotional for Newland and Chrystia Freeland and Sullivan, Blinken. For them, it's emotional. And for Ursula, this has become very emotional. And they're making emotional decisions, very emotional decisions. And those are bad decisions, because the Russians, on the other side, they're remaining cool. They're remaining quiet. No one really knows what they're up to. No one even knows if they're going to go on this big offensive. Putin gave a speech yesterday. Once again, he just stuck to his talking points. He said Russia didn't start this war. This started in 2014. We were provoked. Just go to Angela Merkel's comments, go to Hollande's comments, go to Poroshenko's comments. Zelensky, for the second time in the last 2 days, he said that he was never going to implement Minsk. He gave an interview, I believe, to Der Spiegel, and he said, I was never going to implement Minsk. It was never in my plan to implement it. Once again, you're giving Russia more ammo to make their case that this war was provoked. Because now the Russian government, the Kremlin and Russian media, they're going to pick up Zelensky's comments and they're going to say, he said twice in 2 days that he wasn't going to implement Minsk. So now you have a statement from Zelensky, you have a statement from Poroshenko, the current president, the former president, you have a statement from Merkel, and you have a statement from Hollande. All of these people are saying the same thing. We were never going to implement Minsk, ever. And the Russians are going to jump on that. And the Nord Stream thing, one sec. The Nord Stream thing is going to blow up in their face as well. No pun intended. But the narrative around Nord Stream, the article from Seymour Hersh, was picked up by the Global Times, by Chinese media. And they read an article saying, U.S. urged to explain Nord Stream blasts after Pulitzer winner's probe. 6 months after the explosion of the Nord Stream gas pipeline, which shocked the world, an article by veteran U.S. investigative journalist Seymour Hersh has accused the U.S. of being the culprit of the blasts. And the whole article from Chinese media, from the Global Times, makes the case that, this guy is about as reputable as journalist as you can get. And no one in the U.S. media is covering this story. The denials from the U.S. government are, okay, they're strong denials, but these aren't the denials from the main people who have been accused. Alexander said this in a live stream we did on Danny's channel, The Left Lens, yesterday. Alexander made a great point. He said, the denials have been strong by the spokespeople, but we haven't seen Burns, the CIA head. We haven't seen Jake Sullivan, Biden, Newland, Blinken. Where are their denials? I mean, this is about as serious an accusation as you can get. According to Seymour Hersh, this was one of his sources said this was an act of war. So, I mean, where is Jake Sullivan? Where is Burns coming out and saying, look, this never happened? Norway, by the way, has also issued a denial. They said this is ridiculous. I think the foreign minister of Norway, but Norway should take this very seriously. I mean, I would expect top-level government officials, military officials, not the foreign minister, military officials, to come out and say, this never happened. And the same goes for the U.S. Burns should be giving a press conference saying this is all false. And he should lay out the case why this is false. He should argue Hersh's article. But you're not seeing that. You're just seeing this is utterly false, this is fake from just the standard spokespeople. And then you had the foreign minister in Norway say this is rubbish, he pretty much said. But I don't want to hear from the foreign minister. I want to hear from the military. I want to hear from the people that Hersh is claiming were involved in plotting this scheme. They should come out and say this is nonsense. You're not getting that. Anyway, China's jumping on this. Every country outside of the collective West is jumping on this revelation. And Russia's going to use this. Absolutely. The Kremlin is going to use this to say, there you go. Once again, we were provoked. They were thinking of blowing up Nord Stream even before the special military operation. That's what Russia's going to say. Actually, Maria Zakharova actually put a post on Telegram kind of saying as much. She was like, explain yourselves, United States. Explain yourselves. What's going on here? Let's hear some comments. So, Zelensky, he's running around saying, I'm not, okay. Zelensky's running around, he's saying, I was never going to implement Minsk, Hollande, Poroshenko, Merkel, and Putin is making statements saying, there you go. Do you need any more proof? So, another sign that things are crumbling for the collective West is that they're getting very nervous about collecting the assets, the money that they stole from Russia, the frozen assets. Freeze, not seize. Remember when Ursula said that? Freeze, not seize. And they're trying to speed up the unfreezing and the seizing part of their plan. The U.S. has started doing it with Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice taking the $5 million from the Russian oligarch. And you have Finland. They're starting to seize the money, unfreeze it and seize it. You have Estonia. They're unfreezing and seizing. And there are reports that Germany is also trying to find a way to unfreeze and seize those funds. They're trying to figure out the legal loopholes to steal the money. Bloomberg, they ran an article. Let me pull it up. I think I have it bookmarked here. Yes, I do. They ran an article the other day saying the EU urged to make banks report size of frozen Russian assets. The EU is now going to all of EU member state banks, and they're trying to find out how much money do you guys have that's from Russia? They're trying to get like an accurate number. They're trying to figure out how much money can they take. They're getting nervous. That's why they're pushing for the seizure of these assets and to unlock these assets, unlock this money, because the end is coming, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow or in a month or in 3 months, but you're going to have to start going through all of the legalities and the processes to get this money unlocked and into your pocket in, say, the next 6 to 9 months. And so they're really speeding things up to get this money. So I thought that was very interesting. You have a couple of more stories, one connected to Starlink, which is that Starlink is, it seems like Starlink is cutting off the Ukraine military, and you have Zelensky and various other Ukraine officials sending out tweets pissed off at Elon Musk, very angry with Elon because he's stopping Starlink. And a lot of talk is that Elon Musk is stopping Starlink from operating in Ukraine because Starlink was never meant to be used by the military. It was never meant to be a weapon of war, which is BS. I'm just calling it. It was absolutely meant to be a weapon of war, and absolutely it was meant to be used by the military and to have contracts with the military so that they can leverage Starlink for their own purposes. Of course it was. It was money. These contracts are money. You're going to sign contracts with the Pentagon because it's big money there for your business. So it was absolutely meant to be used as a weapon of war. But the reason that they're pulling back on Starlink is because the Russians have figured out a way to locate Starlink, and if they want, they can blow it up, the terminals. And Andrei Martyanov had a blog post explaining this. I'll put a link to his blog post, and he nails it. He absolutely nails it. Forget about the whole, I didn't want this to be a weapon of war, and so I'm pulling it out of Ukraine now and I'm stopping it. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. It's because the Russians have figured out a way to counter it. That's pretty much what Andrei figures out. He just puts it together. He says the Russians have these systems. They know exactly where the terminals are now, and if they want to blow them up, obviously they're not going to blow up these little Starlink terminals with expensive missiles, with Iskanders. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But if they want to take these terminals out, they now know exactly where they are, and they can take them out if they want, as well as the Ukraine soldiers that are in the area. That's also another point. Not only can they locate the terminals, but they can locate the Ukraine soldiers in and around those terminals. So the whole Starlink thing has been figured out by the Russians, which they were going to figure it out sooner or later. They figured out the HIMARS. The tanks, remember all the talk about the tanks? No one's talking about the tanks anymore. Everyone's talking about fighter jets, which no one has. Poland says they're not going to give their fighter jets until other countries give their fighter jets. Belgium says they don't have any fighter jets to give. Anyway, the Russians can counter anything that they throw at them. That's the point. And even Peskov said it the other day. If the collective West gives fighter jets to Russia, it is not going to change the outcome of the conflict. All it's going to do is to prolong the suffering. And not only of Ukraine, but in this instance, it's going to prolong the suffering of collective West nations and collective West pilots and the families of those pilots. Because there's the belief that it's going to be NATO personnel that are going to be flying those planes. So that's the Starlink story, given the fact that that we now have a new precedent set with destroying infrastructure from the Nord Stream revelations, that it's okay now to destroy critical infrastructure. What does that mean for the Starlink satellites? Just saying. I mean, now that we have this new reality that it's okay to blow up communication infrastructure, energy infrastructure, whatever, what does it mean for communication satellites? What does it mean for Starlink? That's Joe Biden. That was Joe Biden that made that decision. So that's the one story. And before I get to my clown world, I have another story here that I bookmarked, which I haven't really read into this article too much, but I just thought I would throw it out there. It's Ukraine's rocket campaign reliant on U.S. precision targeting, officials say. And this is from the Washington Post. It says Ukrainian officials say that they almost never launch HIMARS rounds without detailed coordinates provided by the U.S. military personnel situated elsewhere in Europe. But we're not a party to the war. We're not a party to the war. Once again, the Russians are going to take this, the Russian media, the Kremlin, they're going to say, okay, if you're not a party to the war, then what are you? What are you then, United States of America, or the countries in Europe, because it says in Europe, the countries in Europe that are providing this, these coordinates, what does it mean for them? Are they a party to the war now? Emotional decisions, bad decisions were made all around and are being made all around in the collective West. Anyway, let's do a clown world and wrap this video up. And the first clown world is, I'm just going to put up a photo of Bashar al-Assad and Zelensky side by side. Bashar al-Assad, shaved, fresh, neat, confident, at war for 12 years. Zelensky, bristles, puffiness, dresses like a bum, the look of a beaten dog, at war for less than a year. I never thought about that. Assad, throughout the entire war in Syria, he kept his look. He was always with a suit and tie. He was always clean shaven. He always kept his composure. He was always calm when he gave interviews. I mean, I think he's London educated, and his wife is also London educated. He's an eye doctor by education. But 12 years of a war that was waged against you by the collective West, Obama, the U.S., ISIS, all of these forces waged against you to overthrow you for 12 years, and he never looked unkept. Zelensky at 1 year is just a mess, falling apart. I thought that was really interesting. And by the way, the video that I made a couple of days ago where I kind of sounded off about how the U.S. should remove sanctions against Syria because of the earthquake, we're now getting a lot more people on Twitter and on YouTube talking about this. And that's a good thing, because people need to sound off to talk about how the U.S. should drop the sanctions against Syria, even for a 3 to 6 month period. Even the Greek Prime Minister, Mitsotakis, came out and admitted that Greece can't help Syria because of the sanctions. Even though they're suffering from the earthquake. Even the Greek prime minister said, we can't do anything because of the sanctions. Man, oh man, that's just infuriating. No country in the collective West has helped Syria from the earthquake. Not one, because of the sanctions. And you're telling me that sanctions aren't evil? That sanctions aren't meant to make the people suffer? That's exactly what sanctions are there for. They're not there to make the politicians or the elite suffer. They're there to make the people suffer. I thought I would throw that out there. A final clown world, and that'll be the end, is from Estonia. The Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, suggested buying weapons for Ukraine according to the jab scheme, the same one in which Ursula got in a bit of deep trouble for. Let's just leave it like that. And of which she hasn't really given us any information or any of the contracts that she had going on there. She hasn't disclosed anything. This has kind of been memory hold, Ursula, and what was going on there during the disease. Let's just leave it at that. A couple of a year and a half ago. But now you have the Estonian Prime Minister saying, you know what we should do? We should buy weapons along the same lines, like the scheme that was used then. Let's use that again because, of course, it worked out then. Why not use it again, but this time for weapons? Anyway, that's the video, guys. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble as well. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.